my rental cost is equivalent to like what someone else can get as like a loft apartment in other countries, which is crazy to me.
We also have to understand that Singapore is a city. If you wanted a room in a city versus the suburbs, the price is very different. But just that in Singapore, there's not really like a suburb.
Property increasing, cost of living increasing, everything increasing, wages staying the same.
It's a minority in Singapore. I think you mentioned racism is one reason why you want to leave Singapore, right?
It's a much more painful phenomenon to experience racism in the country that you're born in, where like I'm Indian, so technically I'm in four of the official races, right? But a lot of people in this country just don't consider minorities as default Singapore. Like immediately were considered other. This is home, truly. But is it? Is it home? Is it truly? Is it home truly?
Happy National Day, everybody! But are we really happy in Singapore? Is Singapore really such a bad place to stay? Let's discuss. There are many reasons why people are leaving Singapore. This is what I've read online and I think from our own friends and family. Number one is the stress, the rat race, there's no work-life balance, cost of living, house and car, so expensive. Racism, even though you're like a Singaporean. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. Racism. Racism, no freedom of speech, like in the politically and in the arts side of things. We are first world country with third world mentality. There's no respect for people who are doing blue collar jobs, and if you don't have a degree, like you can't go anywhere. There's a lack of upward mobility. Of course, we also have more trivial reasons, like there's no nature, okay, sorry, no mountains or anything, just some hills. It's too hot, there's nothing to do, it's very boring, it's too crowded. Starting the discussion today, if you all were given another choice, right, to be born anywhere in the world, would you all still want to be a Singapore citizen?
Ooh.
I want to be a Singapore citizen, yes.
Top choice.
Oh, yes. Top choice, I guess.
Okay, I would not say my first choice is Singapore.
Oh.
Okay, if I have a second life, I think I want to stay somewhere else to explore something
Where?
different. Okay, very typical, but maybe the Nordic countries, because it's very far now from Singapore, so I want to experience something different.
Socialism.
But then, if it's like my first life, only get one choice, then I think Singapore might be quite a tossed up lah. What about you, Shivani?
I mean, I don't have a specific country. I'll say like the Australia, UK, Canada thing. Just a country where I think play is encouraged more. Because my main gripe with Singapore is I'm very scared to try because I'm very scared to fail. Like I'm scared of the mess. Versus I feel like if I was born in another country, I'd be predisposed to being more comfortable with failing.
So what do we think are the three biggest reasons like why Singaporeans are leaving?
Okay, so I would say cost of living. So like I was just having a conversation with my friends over the weekend and they were talking about how like if you're single, you know, like you cannot BTO, you cannot buy resale until you're 35 years old, right? So let's say in a situation where like you really have like family issues and like you need to move out, there's very limited options for you, and even like renting cost wise is insane. Like you see those like videos of like, you know, when people do like their room tour in other countries, like the rental cost, like okay, because I'm personally renting also, right? My rental cost is equivalent to like what someone else can get as like a loft apartment in other countries, which is crazy to me. Yeah, in Singapore, like I think the market rate now, like if you want to rent like a master bedroom, is already 1K, 1.2K around there, right? Yeah, so I would say that cost of living is like a huge thing, and this is talking about like property only. Yeah, if you want to talk about like other things like food and all that, I'm sure there's a lot more.
So a lot of people cited that as their reasoning for leaving because we always want to get a house and a car.
Yeah.
But to bring it into like larger perspective, right? We also have to understand that Singapore is a city ma. So when you compare rent, let's say to, I don't know, Australia, that you are maybe, if you wanted a room in a city versus the suburbs, the price is very different. But just that in Singapore, there's not really like a suburb kind of thing.
Like for sure land scarcity, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know, then do we really need a car? I mean, in Singapore, I don't think we need. So is it also like, maybe we need to change our perception
I
of...
don't need a car, but I need a house.
Yeah. And also grocery money needs to stop being so expensive. Yeah, I mean, I think because the cost of living thing is a worldwide problem, right? Like it's everywhere. However, when you compare like the relative cost of renting in Singapore, buying groceries in Singapore and everything compared to like elsewhere, you definitely like feel like the pain of my friend who currently is doing an internship in Amsterdam. She can buy a bag of 4 large croissants for €1. And I'm like,
I can get water with that.
Okay, but I think we need to take that with a certain perspective.
okay.
I don't know why I'm supporting Singapore so much. But but there are things that are going to always cost more in certain countries
Yeah lah.
that will cost less. So if this person in Europe go and buy like, I don't know, 小白菜, like it's going to cost more there, right?
We complain a lot about like I think cost of food, but I do think that Singapore does have cheap options.
Yeah lah.
If like you want to go to like a coffee shop and like eat like cai fan or like 250. Okay, I don't think 250 chicken rice exists, but like maybe like $4 chicken
Yeah.
rice, $5 chicken rice.
Yeah.
It does exist lah. There are still options for like cheaper stuff.
Yeah.
So
My friend the other day was talking about how in Singapore you have very cost efficient options and you have very luxury options versus somewhere like Dubai where the luxury options are much cheaper but you don't have the low cost option like hawker center option. Everything is restaurant tier price. So like cafe price at the very minimum. So like yeah lah, if you really need be, you can get a more affordable meal.
yeah.
Shivani, as a minority in Singapore, I think you mentioned racism is one reason why you want to leave Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Please tell us why.
It's a very painful experience to understand that a lot of people in this country, our generation or not, just don't consider minorities as default Singapore. Like immediately were considered other. Like immediately, like if a taxi driver's uncle sees me, or like even someone younger than me, like who's Chinese, who sees me, they won't see me as Singaporean. They'll see me as Indian Singaporean, and they'll identify me as such. So like, oh my god, let me tell you this story. Cause me hopping into a Grab and the uncle being like, oh girl, how long have you been in Singapore? It's a very normal experience. At this point, I'm just like, you are just ignorant. I don't know how long you've been in this country where Indians suddenly cannot be Singaporean. Step into this Grab. He picked me up from HDB, start driving, and he's like, oh, how long you been in Singapore? And I was like, I born here. And then he was like, he very confused. I'm like, why are you confused? And he's like, so then your parents moved here when? And I was like, my parents were born here. And then he was like, Then he confused again, then he drive in silence for a while, and I'm like, I could see his brain like, is the meme of the blonde lady with the meth. I could see it on his face while he was driving, and I was like, I'm gonna help you, and I'm like, my grandparents moved here from India. He was like, so you're Indian, but you're considered Singaporean already lah. And I was like, 什么? Wait, 什么? Anyway, that's a side story. But like I get that often enough where I'm like, whatever, it's just this is just an everyday experience of being a minority. It's not fine, but like it's just old people. But this other story happened to me last June, I think around this time. It made me damn angry because it was a young person. I think because I was 24, so I think this kid was like probably 19, 20, 21 kind.
Old enough.
Old enough. Young, but still young. Not say old, but not say very young. Should know better. I was walking to the bus stop and suddenly this barrage of like 20 bicycles suddenly come at me from behind, but no one's ringing the bell. So I just keep being like, then the last 2 bicycles come at me like from behind, right? But then these boys were like very annoyed since they're representing their group. So they were like, you see bicycle, you move out of the way, right? And then I damn angry, I was like, ring your bell, right? He and his friend like passed me, and then they were going to turn a corner, and I could this happened on his face in a split second, but I could see him look at me, and then I saw him smirk, so which means he actively was choosing to say this, and then he say, "Aya, you smelly Indian lah," and then ran and then like bicycled away.
Reflect!
And I was like, wow. So it's that kind of thing where it's like, it's not like he's the only racist 20-year-old Chinese boy in the country, right? It's indicative of like a larger culture.
Every year, I think about 1,000 plus Singaporeans are giving out their passports. Yeah. Is this number something we're okay with, or should we be doing more to like retain our Singaporeans?
We definitely should be doing more, considering I can immediately think of like many reasons why people would want to leave, like the rat race thing, how stressful it is, how rigid society is. So, 1,000 every year in comparison to like our population doesn't sound that big, but when I think about the reasons are very much monumental. And also I think the number would be higher, I think, if people like I feel like if you ask Singaporeans how many ideally would want to leave every year or give up the passport every year, I feel like the number will be much higher. It's just people are just like maybe accepting their situation of like, it's easier for me to stay here.
So do you all think Singapore will become more or less desirable to stay in the future? Like, I'm talking about 20, 30, 50 years later.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, we just got a change in leadership, but we don't know what that looks like beyond just words at this point. And Singapore is a big proponent of incremental change. Very incremental minor change. So I mean, obviously things will improve lah, but there's also globally we're in a climate that's very worrying because there's a rise in fascism kind of all over the world. I don't know how Singapore is going to progress past that. I think it's been said by our new leadership that we're gonna push in a direction that seems favorable, like less rigid, more like there's a right path, but it's whether it's like it's your right path. There are many right paths, that kind of a thing.
So, Shivani, you mentioned about incremental changes that you feel that it's not happening fast enough.
Like for example, 377A is repealed, however they put in the constitution such that it's harder to in the future get gay marriage, that kind of a thing. So it's like one law that wasn't being enforced in the first place is gone, however another like milestone has kind of been taken off the table. Yeah.
For me, I'm still on the optimistic side because I see Singapore does a lot of long-term planning, which I don't feel that other countries are really doing like long-term planning. I mean, you look at US, they are just thinking about who's the next president or political party in charge. Maybe not the best case example, but there are thoughts being planned like 30, 50 years later, what we want to look like. And I hope that it will get better because right now I think there's a kind of like a disconnect between the older generation and younger generation. But over time, of course, the younger generation will make up the bigger part of the population. Hopefully then things can change faster the way that you were talking about. The incremental changes can then take off faster lah. So, and over time, we're also seeing more opposition voices in parliament itself. So I think that's a good progress that we are being open to more alternative voices. And even the government in charge, like Lawrence Wong, I think he has a very different leadership style from even like Lee Kuan Yew or Lee Hsien Loong. Okay. So I see that as a good progress.
I think the desirable thing is also 50-50 because I think while one area might be getting better, other areas might really not be getting better. So the only thing on my head now is cost of living because it's really just only going to get more expensive, especially in Singapore.
So if there's one thing that you could change about the system in Singapore that will make more people want to stay, what do you think it will be?
If we could change one thing, can we like install a centralized cooling system all across Singapore? I would stay for the rest of my life.
And then beyond the cooling system, global warming.
I'll be dead by then, it's fine. Okay, no. I would say that I think creating more room for people in like the creative and the art industries, because even in my own circle, like there are friends who are like graduating from like, let's say like musical theatre or like acting courses, and their immediate thought is like, I need to go overseas, like to like make it somewhere in my career. Like it's not happening in Singapore. So I don't know how or like whether we can actually start in Singapore, because I do understand that like, yeah, Singapore like need the money. We cannot like afford that much like investment into creative and arts.
What's your answer?
I think it will be the schooling system, the education system. Yeah,
That would make Singaporeans stay.
Yeah, because I believe it starts when you are young, what the culture of your country is like. So I really wish to see a system where there's more emphasis on play, like learning things, making mistakes, being okay to fail. And then I think if that generation gets like that kind of sense built in them, then over time it will help things overall.
I think it's also just the rigidity of the governmental system also. I don't know how to elaborate on that, but it's just the fact that we don't have a bunch of civil liberties. And I don't think if they like suddenly give us all the civil liberties, culturally we will still be the same kind, I'm fairly sure. So it does start in the education system, but I think if if we're doing the chronologically, education system change, and then if the society that those kids enter is also like able to support like a more autonomous, independently thinking populace, that kind, then I think things will be better also lah.
So final conclusion,
Ah.
Shivani, despite all like the racism stuff that you
Ah.
face, will you still stay in Singapore?
Yeah.
I would still stay in Singapore, yes.
Okay.
Would you stay in Singapore?
I think so.
Yay!